Brasil não quer ter qualquer participação, mesmo que indireta, porque eu acho que nesse instante do mundo nós deveríamos estar procurando quem é que pode ajudar a encontrar a paz entre Rússia e Ucrânia. Nós precisamos encontrar alguém, porque até agora a palavra paz é muito pouco utilizada.
What you just watched was President Lula laying down the truth when it comes to the war in the Ukraine. Peace over more weapons. Peace over more weapons. You better talk about that, President Lula. And here's some context to what Lula was addressing specifically. This headline: Lula rejects German Chancellor's plea for Brazilian weapons for Ukraine. Brazil would not send over to Ukraine the desired parts of the German-made Gepard air defense tank, and no ammunition either. Lula declares, quote, Brazil has no interest in handing over munitions that can be used in the war between Ukraine and Russia. We are a country committed to peace. Yes, baby. Go ahead, President Lula. And President Lula is not giving in to the war hawks on either side of this conflict. His calls for diplomacy are rational and they are most courageous in a time where common sense seems especially lacking. Many of you may have had a grandmother similar to mine, but my grandmother would always say common sense ain't common. No, it is not. You got a whole bunch of educated fools running things, but they have not a near lick, to quote grandma, not a near lick of common sense. So meanwhile, the US continues to provide billions of dollars worth of weapons. A package of US military aid for Ukraine announced on February 3rd includes rockets with a range twice the distance of the rockets Kyiv now has. The ground-launched small diameter bombs is included in a 2.2 billion US military aid package announced by the Pentagon. A peace is a possibility. We must support Ukraine, but whatever happened to the peace talks? Like, we're not on the peace side of that ledger yet in the United States of America. It is important that we actually do both of those things. And we'll go a long way if countries like the United States rally the international community to continue to push for peace, even in our support for Ukraine over what Russia has done. Russia was wrong all day long, twice on Sunday, but we should be pushing for peace. We should be pushing for the leaders of Russia and Ukraine to have a conversation about how to find the peace. You're gonna get what you're seeking. And so far, they are not seeking peace. So that's why we're not finding it, because it's not, nobody's seeking it. So as of yesterday, the number of civilians killed or injured in Ukraine continues to grow. And then we also know we have casualties of Russian descent as well. Number of civilians and casualties injured in Ukraine, we got over 7,000 killed, and 438 of them are children. Over 11,000 people injured, 851 of them are children. There are a lot of innocent people being killed or injured because of this war. A lot of money being poured in on both sides of this. When are we going to have the conversation about diplomacy and peace? And when did peace become taboo? Let's put up what my stunt double had to say about that. Americans are tired of endless wars. Peace should always be the goal. Unfortunately, peace isn't as profitable as war. Let's lead that up. Dan, that's what she said, and she meant that.
Love it. I wish I could retweet it through my screen right now. It's really important, and yeah, shout out Michael Brooks, who like on the left has been really like levitating the idea of Lula and like bringing him to a lot of the American left's attention. But now that he is president of Brazil, he is able to, as a leader of like one of the, I think like the largest country in South America, he's able to kind of like take a stand from that level of power and say, listen, America is up enriching its own war machine and its own international interests in aiding Ukraine. Ukrainians definitely need like whatever they can get to, fight to defend their territory from Russia, because Putin, it's gonna have to be Putin's decision, willingly or unwillingly, to end this war. But there's so many forces that are saying more weapons, more weapons, more weapons, more weapons, that you need to have equally loud forces also saying, let's find some way for peace. Let's push for peace as hard as we possibly can. How can we pressure Putin to come to the table even more than just using this brute force? Let's see who runs out of missiles first strategy, because that leads to violence, it leads to suffering, and it is already going to be messy to clean up afterwards, but every single day it does just get worse. So I'm very glad that Lula is like one of the first people who's just like kind of pushing for peace as well. So let's hopefully we see more.
Yeah, it's definitely my hope. And it's so good to see an elected official who ran on some things and now he is implementing the very things that he ran on. And it does take an enormous amount of courage to say that he is not going to thrust his country into this war churn, very much so. Now, and seriously, I mean, if we want peace, we got to do something to work towards it. And the only thing that we and the rest of the world so far, with the exception of Lula, are working towards is just compounding the warlike conditions that the Ukraine is in. Again, Russia is wrong on this front all day long. Another sovereign nation trying to take their stuff should not be doing that. Ukraine is an ally. Okay, we're there for our allies, because if it was us, we want somebody to be there for us. However, comes a point where the war must end. I mean, we should want that to end, and it doesn't seem like that is happening. Another point I like to make in this whole debate is that for every dollar that's spent over there, we need to be spending $2 over here domestically. How is it that, to quote the urban poet Tupac, got money for wars, but we can't feed the poor? The only bipartisan, the most important bipartisan action we get in this Congress is for the war machine. But when it comes to anything else that we need, whether it's a child tax credit or putting people to work or voting rights or labor rights, you name it, they can't seem to come to grips or to agreement with that in a bipartisan way. Shame on these people. Go ahead on President Lula.